Hey everyone, today I want to talk about a very interesting character. His name is Bartimaeus. This is a character in a fictional book series that I read a few years ago. It's a trilogy that has now become a sequence because they made a fourth book, which I'm very excited about. But this is quite the book, and I just want to talk about this one character in this book because he's such a personality, and the whole world that's created is just very interesting, and it really very much reminds me of Harry Potter, and I really hope that one day they make this into a movie, or if all worse comes worse, heck, I might go out and make this into a movie myself. But Bartimaeus really makes or breaks this whole thing if it ever becomes a movie, because he is such a personality, and for the right actor to play him right, it's essential. But even if that's the case, like, there's all sorts of other stuff that could screw up the movie. Having said that, though, let me just tell you about this whole book and who Bartimaeus is. Um, it's a great fictional series, and basically the idea behind this whole series is that it's set in the times of our human world, our modern day society. And the difference is that it's a alternate history because there's all these magicians about. So it may start sounding like Harry Potter, but then it takes a completely different spin. So it's actually very different because it's not as lovey-dovey, kiddie as Harry Potter at all. And you got these magicians, and they don't personally have powers. They use their powers to summon spirits to do their bidding. And the stronger you are, generally, the stronger and longer you can summon these spirits out. And there's different classes of spirits. Now, Bartimaeus is a 5,000-year-old spirit, and he's about a mid-level spirit. And he's pretty cheeky, to tell you the truth. But we'll get to him. So, basic setting is that it's set in London, and you got the actual history that we have lived by, but it has been dramatically altered by the presence of magic, magicians, demons throughout history. And this has caused a lot of different changes, such as a different type of oligarchy and the overthrowing of the British monarchy. And so now we have a ruling governing class from the prime minister all the way down to regular governing bodies, all ruled by magicians. And then you have the common folk, the humans who can't do magic. But everyone knows that magic's there. It's not like hidden. And so it's very interesting seeing this come about. I mean, the whole story is just very well done. And you got these very interesting scenes where there's like a governing party where they're meeting together, and everyone's trying to show off by summoning a fancier, the genie, at this event. And it's just so ridiculous because the main character Nathaniel and the genie, the genie Bartimaeus, have snuck into this event, and they see all these governors and high-level people spending all this time to prepare and summon these awesome spirits, when this little kid Nathaniel summoned Bartimaeus, and he's done it a long time ago. And it's very funny how this whole story works, because Nathaniel is this little kid who's like a genius at summoning these things, but he has the worst, crappiest mentor ever, who won't teach him a thing and just scares him and does all this horrible stuff, so he learns it on his own. And they snuck into this event. So it's very interesting. Now let's just get to Bartimaeus. You can tell how excited I am about this story. Let's start with Bartimaeus. In fact, I mean, it goes into so much detail. I feel like if it was done right with the right production and money and so forth, it could become a somewhat short mini TV series like Game of Thrones. But let me just here's who Bartimaeus is. Okay, this is quite the interesting fellow, and along the way you will learn a little bit more about how interesting this world is. So he's sarcastic and he's very cheeky. This is quite the personality. And if this were ever to be made into a film, the right person who plays Bartimaeus will make or break this film. It's kind of like how Johnny Depp made Pirates of the Caribbean into what it is. If it wasn't for Johnny Depp playing Captain Jack the way he played it, the film would not have exploded, I don't think. If it had been any other character, Captain Jack has quite the personality. Now, Bartimaeus is nothing like Captain Jack Sparrow, but he is that sort of personality. He jumps off the pages. He's very sarcastic and cheeky, and he's a mid-level tier beast. And living 5,000 years in the human world, he's had many masters, and he oftentimes has a bit of a bloated ego because of that. I wouldn't consider him arrogant or cocky to the extent of a person who just thinks he's like better than everyone else. But he does have a bit of ego in the sense that if he's ever summoned and forced to do jobs that are kind of like mediocre, he will become indignant and say, like these tasks that you assign me are unworthy of my talents. And he's also quite the interesting character, especially in how the book is written, because it's written in a narration, a third-person narration, but it's covered with footnotes. So every page they'll have like these little numbers at the end of every a sentence, every couple paragraphs, and then you look down in this huge block of footnotes at the bottom, and the footnotes are in first person in Bartimaeus' words, pretty much remarking on his perspective of the situation. And he's very cheeky, sarcastic. He makes quite the humorous side comments throughout the story. And he's just very interesting. He enjoys insulting his master oftentimes, and he oftentimes boasts about his exploits because he's lived 5,000 years, and he's done all these things, and he's helped all these people. And it's funny because you got these other spirits, especially his rival, I mean, he's run into quite a few spirits throughout the years, so when he gets summoned, oftentimes he may run into someone who he knows. And so he has rival spirits and people he just hates or doesn't like. One of them being Farquhar. I feel like I'm pronouncing his name wrong. But this guy, Farquhar, is a greater Djinni, and this person, for whatever reason, by fate, by luck, has oftentimes been on the opposite end of every army or human in history that has summoned Bartimaeus. And they've oftentimes been rivals and enemies. And it's just very interesting how it works. Bartimaeus, apparently he's gone through a lot of interesting things in his life. He witnessed and was apparently a great part of Genghis Khan's death, and he helped build Prague, Jericho, Uruk, Karnak. He helped erect the Leaning Tower of Pisa. He spoke with Solomon and all this other stuff. And it's very interesting how he brings up this stuff because on the flip side, when Farquhar and others mention him, they're very dismissive of his achievements. They're like, they tend to bring up stories about how he failed and how he was incompetent or he was a coward. And it is very interesting, and I just think the author is quite the genius for choosing Bartimaeus to have the power level that he has. Because although he is very strong, he's not like supremely strong, which puts in a certain perspective. It's kind of like this short guy who has that disadvantage because he's short. And because of that, he embraces it, he plays off of it, and he uses it. And he, in certain situations, when he realizes he can't maybe do certain things, Bartimaeus will just retreat. Because sometimes he ends up fighting stronger spirits in certain situations. Like he's been all through history, so he's had to spy on people. He's had to shape shift into humans. All sorts of things. And I just think that this whole universe has, like, you can imagine the potential, like this whole story has, all the little tiny things that make this world an amazing place. And I remember this one scene that was just amazing. And I mean, I read these books a long time ago, many years ago, and it was kind of like, I remember this one moment when I was reading the books, and the covers are kind of weird because you got these weird beast animals on them. And I remember this girl didn't like her at all, whatever. But for whatever reason, we were stuck together, and she made a remark about the cover, and she was just like, it was the only time, despite all the time we were forced to spend together, where she remarked on the book. And it's like, she saw me reading it for so long, and it was just like, she was like making fun of it. And it's just like, how ignorant can people be? To the point where they're not even interested or curious enough to ask about how amazing this book is. And that's how kind of people are. But anyways, it's very interesting because there's this one scene in this book that I still very much remember. It's a scene where Bartimaeus is captured in a in this sort of magical cage, which every certain amount of time would shrink, and you couldn't touch the outsides of it because it would hurt you. And so because of this, Bartimaeus had to keep shapeshifting into smaller animals in order to survive. And it was just a very interesting scene because it's like, that's amazing. Like, this is the caliber that reminds me of J.K. Rowling. Now, it's not a perfect book, but this scene was just awesome because here he was, and he kept shape-shifting, and he kept choosing animals just naturally, unconsciously, that were Egyptian in nature. Although he was in modern London times, he was choosing Egyptian animals. And it's just very interesting seeing all this. And it was just like, wow, that's pretty awesome. Because the dialogue goes, basically these other spirits were sort of questioning him, asking him who he was, where he came from, what's his name, and so forth. And he wouldn't tell them. And they sort of deduced through the animal state that he shapeshifted, that he had a natural inclination or favoritism to the Egyptian time. So that was probably where he spent most of his time in the human world during that age, which is true. And I remember I think he did a scarab beetle and all sorts of other things. And I just thought that was a great scene. And it just shows you the potential for this world. I really hope Jonathan Stroud keeps writing books on this. The trilogy is a great trilogy, and then he made a new sequence, a new book. But I don't know if he'll keep going. But this world, I mean, it's just amazing, and it's also very interesting because of how, I mean, Bartimaeus is a character who always boasts about his exploits, and he oftentimes has a big mouth. I'm not gonna lie. He's kind of that guy who, if you don't want someone to talk, he might be that guy who keeps talking or gets you in trouble for talking a little bit too much. Anyhow, this is quite the character, and he's also that type of guy who might just, I guess you can say, talk and use his wits to get himself out of a situation that he's stuck in, even to a point of flattering his enemy. He's that kind of humorous guy, and I think it's quite the character. And so I mean it's just a very interesting story, very awe-inspiring, and I mean it's a great book. One day I may read it again. I don't read a lot of fiction books nowadays because nonfiction, which I definitely remember at one point was a genre I never thought I would even touch, but now I mean it's like nonfiction is where it's at for personal development, success, and all this other stuff, which is why I read a ton of nonfiction nowadays. But you know, I value fiction as well in certain ways, and this is just the power of the creative imagination. I mean, anything is possible. The sky is the limit, and for someone like Bartimaeus to be made, I just think, wow, maybe that is possible. Like we have billions of galaxies with billions of planets on each of them. Perhaps it's possible. Even if not, I just think the world is quite an amazing place to be. And again, yeah, I'm trying to think of what else to say about him. I guess I highly recommend this book because, especially the first one, because there's this one scene, and the third one's also really good. In that one, all these new creatures and developments come about. They have these things, I think they're called golems, where you have these magicians or sorcerers sitting in a room in a remote location far off, and then they're controlling through these orbs these golems that are like monstrous things that can literally just like they're just immune to like all these magic attacks, and they can do all this sort of thing. And it's very interesting Bartimaeus seeing one again, because he hadn't seen one for quite a while, since a long time ago, back when he was fighting in an army. And it's just like, wow, it's very interesting seeing these guys again, because they're tough cookies to take down, almost impenetrable. And then you got the I mean, there's another great scene, not the first scenes, but the very first scene when Nathaniel, that young kid, summons Bartimaeus, and Bartimaeus' whole reaction to this little kid summoning him, this magician genius. And I think the world in itself, in the first three books, I haven't read the fourth one, but it's because it's mainly just set in London times. I mean, I definitely think the universe for this has so much potential, because he keeps alluding and referencing to all these huge armies and fights that took place in the past, in Egypt and so forth, and Genghis Khan and all this stuff. And we never really see that sort of thing much, because it's set in modern times. We see more of alleyway, streetway, sneaking about, one-on-one fights and stuff like that, because it's in modern London times, and not so much huge armies clashing. And so, I mean, there's so much potential for this. And I guess the last thing I want to say is, like, the world, when you open it up and you take a peek into it, it's just very interesting. You also there's also these characters that they're humans, and they just naturally, genetically, or for whatever reason, have some level of resistance to magical attacks from these spirits, which is incredible, because a lethal attack or spell or whatever it is from one of these Djinni should take them out. And then when they're throwing all they got, and these people, it's almost like they just they get hit by a punch, and then they just get back up and start fighting. It can get very tough for the Djinni and other spirits to deal with. And then you get humans capitalizing on this and using special spells and items to fight against spirits. And it's a very interesting world. And I mean, just watching it unfold is crazy. And for someone like Jonathan Stroud to just pull this out of his head, absolutely stellar. And I really hope like one. I mean, I've held this idea for a while now. It's just that, and the idea is that there's so much amazing work that's already been written, but so many people out there are just unaware of it. They're completely unaware of how all these amazing stories that are ready to be written or observed, or maybe even movies that have already been filmed that people are just unaware of. And it's the same thing with books on knowledge, on success, on accumulating wealth. A lot of these things, they're there for the taking. The problem is it's not just easy access. It's like, I want this, how can I get it? Boom. It takes some digging to get that knowledge. And again, it doesn't apply to everything. One thing is modern dating advice. I don't think that's, because of the change in society and stuff, like that's not going to be there. You can't write books on that 50 years ago that would apply today with huge changes in our lives. But I guess you get the point. And this is one of those books that I think if you guys like that sort of thing, you would enjoy. And I really hope it one day becomes a film or a TV show, just to show the world how awesome this is. And again, I don't, it may be stretching it, maybe not, but it could potentially one day create a cult-like following to the extent of Star Wars or Harry Potter, to the point of merchandise after this. But I don't know about that, but it's a very interesting story. And I mean, I can see so much more potential from this. I would love to see a little bit of maybe the past or maybe the future with these people. Maybe a little bit of Genghis Khan, a little bit of Egyptian times, Prague, Jericho. There is Egyptian references and flashbacks, but generally it's in London. And so, I mean, I'm trying to think of what else I want to say about this, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, here's just check it out for yourself. See you guys later. As always, like, favorite, comment, subscribe.